Hello. So unfortunately, for some reason, the chat box doesn't seem to be working. So as we go, I'll try and fix that, but I'm not sure how far that's going to go. Today we're having a more formal, not formal, but there's just two of us having a discussion about one topic, and we're going to be looking into the chat and taking all the questions you have about the coronavirus. So today I'm joined by Fiona Robertson, and would you like to say hello, Fiona? How are you?
Hello. I'm doing fine. We're sort of semi-lockdown here, as in we're not supposed to be going out, so life could get interesting in a while.
Yeah, I noticed that England's starting. I think I read a headline with people calling it a national lockdown, but really they're closing down pubs and public places that are non-essential.
Yeah, and I wish they'd done it a week earlier, but at least it's happening now. I know Scotland's shutting down the pubs and all the rest of it, just to try and keep people indoors. I mean, it's not a lockdown. People aren't being ordered to stay at home. It's people are being requested to stay at home, and if they do go out, keep well away from other people, just to try this thing of flattening the curve.
So what does that mean? Flattening the curve?
Okay, if you imagine you have a country with, let's just say, 100 million people in it, and this is a virus that spreads very fast. What if it spreads through that entire population in 2 weeks and the whole 100 million hit the hospitals at once? Well, a hospital couldn't cope. Imagine if it hit half of the country in one go. Again, hospitals couldn't cope. So what you're trying to do is, instead of having this front-loaded event where all these sick people come thundering in at the beginning, you try and slow down the spread of it. So you still end up with the same number of people that get infected, but it ends up being over a longer time period, so that at any one time there are fewer infected, so the health service is better able to cope then. Because that's when the mortality rate starts to increase, once the health service becomes overwhelmed, where they have to start making these decisions about, we have one ventilator and 3 patients, who gets the ventilator? They don't want to have to make those decisions. And sadly, that seems to have happened in Italy. So it's a bit like, battlefield triage, where, those that there's no hope, you end up, you don't treat.
So what is the mortality rate?
Currently, going by the numbers available, it's coming in about 3%, but that may be artificially high, because while dead bodies are easy to count, it's harder to count how many are infected, especially if there's a problem with testing. If the testing is running behind the spread of the virus. Now, if we look at America at the moment, they're testing symptomatic people, okay? But you can be incubating this for up to 14 days. You can be up to a week without symptoms before you show any. You can be up to 14 days with no symptoms. But you're going to be infectious for part of that period. So you're busy spreading it around before you even qualify to be tested. So by the time they get round to you and your symptoms and testing you, you've already passed it on to other people. So the testing is running behind. So if you look at the number of people that are confirmed positive, that number, although it's saying this is a number that are confirmed positives today, what it's actually saying is, this is a number of people that were infected 10 to 14 days ago. So you're still playing catch up with the virus.
So, like, what's the best way to prevent it? Because, like, if we can't tell that we're sick because we're not showing symptoms, what's the best way to stop it? And I think before we do that question, though, does the mortality rate change depending on your age and things like that?
Yes, it does. In the much older, say, 70 to 80 years old group, the mortality rate is up at 14 to 15%. And that's a really high number. In young, healthy adults, it's down about the 0.1 to 0.3%. But that doesn't mean that young adults are immune to it. It means they've got less chance of suffering death from it, but they can still have serious long-term consequences from it. It's still a severe illness in many of them with long-lasting lung damage. So it's not just like a mild cold in your teenagers and early 20s. They can get really sick with it as well. It's just that they're more likely to survive it.
So, what actually happens to you if you get sick? What happens if you contract
Do you
the
mean what's
flu?
Do you mean what's happening in your body?
Yeah, what's happening to you? Like, what would you feel? What would you go through?
Well, the symptoms seem to be quite variable. Older people aren't always spiking a temperature, but that's a typical thing in illnesses with elderly. They can miss out on spiking this temperature. One of the consistent things seems to be a dry cough. A really tickly, dry cough. So it's a non-productive cough. And then there's the feeling, what was it? Somebody described it as, I felt as if I'd been hit by a truck. So it's muscle aches, headache, weakness, bone aching, fatigue, and feeling that you're unable even to sort of, you're going to struggle to walk to the loo, let's put it that way, because you feel so weak. It does knock you for six. There've been reports that some people, the first symptom was a loss of their sense of smell, which led to panic in my house this evening because I had made spag bol and my husband picked up the garlic crusher and he sniffed it and he couldn't smell any garlic smell from it. And his first thought wasn't, oh, she didn't use it. No, his first thought was, that's the first sign of COVID. But I hadn't used the garlic crusher, so I was able to put his mind at rest.
Disaster averted. Oh my God. Oh
But
my
I must
God.
admit, that did amuse me because he came thundering into the lounge, clutching our garlic crusher and saying, did you use this? Did you use this? Oh, it's like, thank God for that.
So Jim Hill said, what do you expect to happen in the upcoming weeks? Are enough people taking the proper precautions or will stupid doom us all?
Well, I wouldn't say we're all doomed, but it depends. Having looked at the video footage coming in from Florida beaches, I must admit, I thought to myself, "You were doomed, Captain Mannering." But I'm wondering if the message has now got through with what happened, Thursday, Friday, when California asked people to stay at home, the entire state. Then New York State asked people to stay at home. And now, finally, Trump has declared New York City a national disaster. So I'm wondering if maybe now the penny's going to start dropping with people that this is so infectious. It's much more infectious than flu. So it's much easier to pass from person to person. And this is This is why it's managing to spread the way it does. It is so infectious, but it's got such a long incubation period before you have symptoms. That's why it's spreading around so quickly and to so many people. But maybe if the penny's now dropped with the last couple of days, then the curve can be flattened. You slow down the increase in numbers per day. But even if that does help, you won't see the effects of that for about a fortnight anyway. Because remember, the new numbers tomorrow will represent those that caught it 10 to 14 days ago, before these new measures were put in place. So even if these measures work, you can still expect it to be looking as if it's getting worse for a little while. There's going to be always this 10 to 14 day lag.
Yeah, and so we're always going to be a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Agrippa said, do the symptoms vary from patient to patient? If you don't get the cold or flu normally, will the symptoms be less?
Yeah, the symptoms do vary from patient to patient. I mean, there are certain common symptoms, but they do vary in which one the patient finds the most severe. There are certain symptoms that some patients don't show at all, like in the elderly. A high temperature can be missing. The symptoms that you get are not going to be dependent on whether or not you're somebody who's prone to colds and flu normally. That's going to be irrelevant. The problem with this disease is that your initial symptoms are due to the virus doing the damage and your immune system waking up to the fact that there's an invader there. And the problem is that your immune system is running behind the virus. But then the second wave of symptoms, which some people are getting, is the acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that's when the immune system has wandered into your lungs to look for the invader, but it also finds debris from the remains of dead cells from your lungs. Now, your immune system mops up debris as well. So it starts mopping up all this stuff, but in the process, your immune system produces various chemicals to bring more of the immune system in. And it can go into overdrive and cause what's called a cytokine storm. And that results in your lungs starting to fill up with fluid. And so you start drowning in your own secretions. This was something that was seen with the SARS outbreak back in, I think, was it 2004? That people seemed to be getting better and then they suddenly got worse. And it seemed to have been a cytokine storm that caused that. And that's what was killing people. This is why patients are ending up needing ventilators, because if they do go into this acute respiratory distress syndrome, they need that extra pressure from the ventilator to try and get enough air into their lungs because they're drowning. It's not nice.
So is that everything it does to you? Is that the whole, or the effect it has on you is essentially it makes your immune system attack your respiratory system?
Well, it's not so much it's making your immune system attack the respiratory system, it's the amount of damage that the virus has already done that can cause your immune system to go nuts. But also the virus is doing damage to the lung tissue itself. And so you know how your lungs are full of those little air sacs, the alveoli?
Yeah.
And they can become scarred. And so the oxygen exchange across them is going to be much reduced. So you can be left with this long-term damage to your lungs where your lungs aren't as efficient as they used to be. Plus with scar tissue, makes your lungs stiffer, much harder to inflate. and you can be left with that as well. So there is long-term damage that can be left there. Now, given that this is a brand new disease, they don't know if that damage will improve over time. They have no idea. But what they do know is that there are some reports that have come out of China saying that patients who've had this disease and who've recovered from it and seem to have been completely better have ended up coming back with a completely unrelated pneumonia, and that's killed them. And it's because their lung function isn't as good as it used to be. So it can leave you open to other infections even after you've got over the virus. So there can be long-term consequences. But one of the other things that they've been coming up with is that there can also be gastrointestinal symptoms, as in the runs, people getting diarrhea, high hay. And it seems to be that people who are presenting with gastric symptoms as well as respiratory symptoms, they tend to do worse. And that might be something to do with just the viral load in their body. I don't know. I'm not sure. And I noticed that somebody's asking about the rate of people who recover but get nobody knows the answer yet. It's too new a disease. We don't have the information. You can't look at a virus, look at what it's doing now, and predict the long-term effects in a whole bunch of humans, because everybody's an individual and they all respond differently. But you look for the patterns, and you're only going to see those patterns once you've got enough people and once you've had long enough to see what happens. So you're talking, monitoring the how people do for a good few years after this. And it's from that you would get the data to know. But while we're in the middle of this, we have no idea.
So speaking about it being so new, how long do we know how long it will take to figure out a vaccine?
Even if they find something that can be used to vaccinate right now, even if they find something that provokes an immune response that will inactivate the virus should you come in contact with it, just to get it through the clinical trials is going to take at least a year. That's how long it normally takes. You remember I mentioned this thing about the Cytokine Storm with SARS and with this one. So both of these are the coronaviruses. And this seems to be one of the things about coronaviruses, this Cytokine Storm business. So that's one of the worries about a vaccine. What if the vaccine itself elicited a Cytokine Storm? Or what if the people who are vaccinated were more prone to a Cytokine Storm if they're later exposed? And this is why clinical trials are so important with any form of vaccine, because you don't know what the unintended consequences might be.
So what's the precautions people should take?
Okay, if you've been asked to stay at home, then stay at home. This isn't just to stop you getting it, just to keep you healthy. It's to stop you becoming a statistic and to stop you then going on to make other statistics. We've got to slow the spread of this. If they can do that, if they can flatten that curve, they'll save more people in the hospitals in the long run. I mean, make no mistake, the virus is going to be around for a while. Just because of the sheer numbers that I've got it at the moment and the amount of spread that's still going to happen because people aren't following these rules. But if you've been told to stay at home, then stay at home. If you've been in contact with someone who thinks they have it, even if they're not confirmed, assume that they have it and stay at home and isolate yourself. Assume in the back of your mind that every single person has it, and assume that you've got it, and behave in that way. So you stay at least 6 feet away from everybody. Don't go and visit Great Aunt Ethel. Don't go and visit Grandma. Stay away from your parents if they're older.
So, Person K asked, how long do you think the isolation will last?
I've no idea. If you wanted it to be effective, to actually knock the virus on the head, in the wild, so to speak, you're talking months. But I don't think they're going to manage to do that. I don't think they'll be able to. And so it's going to be a case of everybody having to alter their behaviours, and sticking to those changes for the foreseeable future. This social distancing, this not shaking hands.
So, Amelia asked if you have any suggestions on how to get loved ones to take it more seriously.
Oh, good grief. That's a question that a lot of people have been asking me. I honestly don't know. Because it's hard. If you've got an elderly mother with or without a health condition, and you're saying, look, you need to take this seriously. Oh, no, I'm fit and fine for my age. Doesn't matter how fit you are for your age. I've been watching on Twitter, there's a wee guy, 40-year-old. He's run the New York Marathon twice. And he's come down with it. And he'd been tweeting about, his symptoms and how he was doing and keeping everybody up to date. And then he went silent around about the 17th of March. And his mother has updated everybody that he's now been intubated. So he's now in a ventilator. That's a healthy 40-year-old. If that's not enough to get your 89-year-old great Aunt Ethel to take it seriously, I don't know what is.
So, a bit of a morbid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm a bit interested in your response. Doka's Wild says, is it better to allow this possibly catastrophic damage to the economy to happen rather than a few boomers dying?
Well, a few boomers. Number one, it still kills young people. It's just they've got less chance of dying, but it still can kill them. Then there are all those younger people who've got underlying health conditions like asthma or rheumatoid arthritis or cancer. And then there are all those other people out there who have no underlying health conditions, who get hit by a bus tomorrow and there isn't a hospital bed for them. Or who have a heart attack or a stroke and there isn't a hospital bed for them. Because you see, when the health service gets overwhelmed, it's not just those that are infected that are suffering. Long Island last night, there was a doctor who had a patient with appendicitis and couldn't find any surgeon to operate on that patient. Patient didn't have COVID-19, but they couldn't find a surgeon to operate on them. Couldn't find a hospital bed for them to be in. Now, I also did a back of the envelope calculation on this one, and it was based on what the world population currently is, the percentage that are expected to get infected, which is around 70%, and then the mortality rate of those infected, and working out at death toll works out at 167 million people. That 167 million people is more than just a few boomers.
So that answers the question. And Jim Hall asked a serious question. How will mutation affect COVID-19? Could we see a vaccine that only affects some strains, but not all the new strains?
I don't know. COVID isn't like flu. Flu mutates very readily because its genome comes in segments. So if you get one cell infected with 2 strains of flu, when it comes to assembling the new virus particles, you can end up with a mix and match. So you get some bits from one and some bits from another, and you end up with a new strain. COVID doesn't do that. It's an RNA virus, so it does have a tendency to mutate more than a DNA virus would. But I do believe that the enzyme involved in the replication of its nucleic acid has a bit of proofreading ability so that it can go back and check for errors, which means it's less likely to mutate than some other RNA viruses. So I suppose maybe that's a sort of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. But that enzyme that it uses for its RNA replication, that's one of the targets that they're hoping to use for any drug treatments, because that's not an enzyme that the cells in our body use. RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So they can target that enzyme. They can stop viral replication, hopefully without affecting the cells in our body. You have to find something that's selective, that will hit the virus, but not hit us. Because, I mean, to be quite frank, if you incinerate the virus, you kill it. But people tend to look a bit dimly on you incinerating your patient.
So that makes me question, what is a virus? Like, what actually is it?
You're just trying to get me to swear, aren't you? Viruses are funny buggers. They're not quite alive, and they're not quite not alive. They're sort of on the cusp of life. They don't have the ability to self-replicate the way bacteria can. You just give bacteria food, and they will just multiply, multiply, multiply. The way rabbits do. But viruses can't do that. They don't have the machinery. Viruses can't even synthesize their own proteins. They have no metabolism to speak of. But what they do is they latch onto a host cell and they inject all their gubbins into that cell. And that gubbins is the instructions and the necessary stuff to hijack the cell and the cell's replicating machinery. And so the cell then, instead of carrying out its own functions, doing its own thing, starts following the virus's orders, and it starts making more of the virus because all of its equipment has been hijacked. The virus can't do it without the host cell.
So it's like a parasite, but for cells.
Yeah, it has to get inside a host cell before it can do anything. The problem is that in hijacking the cell, it damages the cell. Some viruses, once enough copies have been made, just cause the cell to go pop and it just bursts. Others bud off from the surface, taking a little bit of the host membrane with it. But eventually the cell sort of burns itself out and dies, because all it's doing is constantly churning out all this stuff that the virus needs. So it's churning out all these copies of virus, and it can't look after itself, and it pegs out.
So a lot of people have been mass buying things like hand sanitizers and stuff. How effective is that? And what's that compared to soap and stuff?
A hand sanitizer. The boon of a hand sanitizer is that you can use it in situations where you don't have access to soap and water. So, for example, you go to the shops, you get your shopping, you put it in the car, you get in the car, and you use hand sanitizer before you touch a steering wheel. So, in situations like that, it's very, very handy. But if you have access to soap and water, that's just as good. And one of the good things about this virus in particular is it does have a viral envelope, a membrane, and soap will disrupt that membrane and inactivate it. So it's more than just physically washing it off your hands. The soap will damage the virus. So if you want to keep your handies clean, soap and water, but make sure you wash your hands properly. So that's at least 20 seconds. And you need to make sure that every bit of skin on your hand is rubbed with that soapy water. Don't miss out in between your fingers. Don't miss the back of your hand or the back of your thumb. Don't miss under your fingernails. Don't miss along the side of your pinky. That's your little finger for Americans. There's a very good video of somebody who put on a pair of surgical gloves, put a blob of black paint on their hand, and then went through the motions of washing their hand, and then had to look at the gloves, and you can see where they'd missed because the black paint hadn't got there. I wish I could remember where I saw that.
So what's your advice for helping make this situation easier for older family members or neighbors and stuff like that?
Okay. Stay in touch with them by telephone or whatever remote way you have of communicating with them. If they need anything, if they need supplies that you're able to get for them, if you could do that so that they don't feel they have to go out for that pint of milk or that loaf. I mean, I heard that somebody mentioned that their mother had driven around 3 towns looking for a loaf. And you think, wait a minute, you've just exposed yourself to 3 different towns here. What was the point of that? But if you do get supplies for them, leave the supplies outside their door and let them know that they're there. Don't knock on their door and expect them to answer it to take in their supplies. And if I might be going a bit over the top here, but I've stopped getting my jam donuts from our supermarket because they just sit out in baskets. So everybody can be coughing on them. So we're not allowed them, not allowed cakes, and I've even stopped fruit because I don't cook fruit. Everything I'm buying now, I cook myself.
So Jim Hill asked, what advice do you have for someone in a more crowded area like a city or apartment building?
6 feet between you all at the one time. Don't use handrails. Touch as little as possible. The whole point about hands is not that the virus getting on your hand means you're then infected. That's not the point. The point is that if you get it on your hands and then you touch your face or you eat a packet of crisps, then you've introduced the virus to the type of skin that it can get through, and that's mucous membranes. So that's the inside of your mouth, the inside of your nose, your eyes. So if you have it on your hand and then you go and scratch your lip or you scratch around your eye, you can transfer the virus. If you've been out somewhere, you've touched door handles, you come home, you've brought the virus in, wash your hands before you do anything in the house. Because you don't want to pick up that virus again and then put it onto the type of skin that it can infect.
So Person K asked, how long would the virus be active after you touch a dry surface that can still infect somebody?
Now that question is sort of how long a bit of string. It depends on the surface. But they do think it can possibly last a couple of days, which is a bit worrying. At first they thought it was a few hours. There is a difference in the length of time between how long it lasts on cardboard and how long it lasts on metal. And I can't remember which way around it goes. And so this is one of these assumptions you're going to have to just go with. Any surface you have to assume might be contaminated, therefore wash your hands. This is the big instruction to sort of try and drive home. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. So that if you do pick it up in your hands, you wash it off before you infect yourself. But also, if you're standing in the supermarket and somebody is coughing like Billy O beside you, run away fast. I mean, if they're standing there just coughing on you, then start worrying.
Right, but even on a healthy time of the year. Annabelle P says, is it true that it can live on cardboard for 24 hours?
I don't know if it's 24 hours. I can't really answer that one. It can survive on cardboard for a while, but I don't know what that while is. Which is why Amazon workers testing positive is a worry.
Is that something that's happened? Is that something? Have I called Corona from my Amazon deliveries?
I think it's Amazon workers in Spain and Italy have tested positive. So that's a concern. So, I mean, if I was getting an Amazon package, right, I must admit I would wipe down the outside of it before I did anything.
I'm already dead.
Are you? Oh. But also, if you've handled your package, wash your hands. Because anything that's coming into your home, you see, this is a problem. It sounds so over the top, but it's not, because this is so contagious.
So what about like your animals and things like that?
So far, there was a rumor that dogs could get it. Somebody's dog tested positive, but it turned out it was the owner that was positive, and obviously had petted their dog, and it was just on the outside of the dog. The dog didn't get it, and the World Health Organization has announced now that dogs don't get it.
Okay, so we just need to figure out if cats and birds get it, and then I'm okay.
I don't think they do. At the moment, it just seems to be humans, pangolins, and bats.
Okay, what a random selection.
Well, it seems to be that this coronavirus originally has come from bats via a pangolin and then into humans.
What's that? What is a pangolin?
It says that they're very cute little creatures. Chinese, they've got little armoured scales on them, and the Chinese put great stock in the little armoured scales of pangolins. They sell for a lot of money.
You've
It's,
triggered everyone in the chat by telling them not to handle their package.
I know I have. But that's, you see, it's one of those things. It's not your high probability, but it's a possibility. And I'm just being really careful about possibilities.
So even if you're not infected or not showing any symptoms, should you still minimize how much you go out and how much you're around people?
Yes, because they can give it to you and you might think you've not been exposed and you have been. So if you go out, you could be passing it to other people, but other people could be passing it to you. So it stays 6 feet, a minimum of 6 feet away from other people if you do have to go out. Take a tissue with you. And if you're going to cough or sneeze into the tissue.
So Tony Design earlier said that there's 2 house parties happening next to him tonight. What do you think about that?
What?
Yeah, apparently.
No. Like, as in, gonna no do that. Just gonna no. House parties are not a good idea at this point.
So do you think this could escalate still, or do you think we're at like peak fuckery?
I'm just going to pull up my more. These aren't the most recent numbers. It's just the most recent ones that I can pull up quickly. Okay. Currently, the US has now jumped over the top of South Korea, France, Iran, and Germany. The US has more cases than those countries. US is sitting at 24,000.
God.
They were only at 4,000 last week.
So what do you think the measures would need to take place if it continues to escalate?
Well, if you look at the countries that have managed to control it, South Korea did loads and loads of testing and loads of contact tracing. So if somebody tested positive, they then tracked down all the contacts as well. And they tested them, and anybody coming up positive was isolated. China locked down everybody. And if somebody came up positive, they were put into what they call a fever hospital. It was like big warehouses that had beds in. And that protected their families that were left at home. Okay. Now, with everybody busy staying at home now, and even the cases are having to stay at home, and they're trying to isolate themselves in their own house with their family and trying to keep their family away from them, but they're running the risk that the rest of the family could get infected. China would take the infected person out of that environment. But that was a really severe lockdown in China. I don't think you'd be able to do that in some other places. Italy is going that way as well. You know, everybody must stay at home, but their numbers are still ratcheting up. But as I say, that's due to the lag.
So what do you think about the like mass hysteria buying of products like toilet rolls and things?
Don't get me started on that. Did you know that the sewage, the main sewers in the UK are now starting to block and backflow up people's toilets? Because of the number of people that are using kitchen roll and newspaper and then flushing it down the toilet. So the sewage system wasn't built for that. And this is because some people are sitting on top of a Mount Everest of toilet paper and other people have got nothing. What's this running Why did they want toilet paper? What was that for?
I have no idea, but I saw that like in the symptoms, it's like this least likely thing to happen is to get diarrhea. So I don't understand what the toilet roll is for.
Do
Even
you
if
know?
the nukes were gonna go off, wouldn't you want to stock up on like food rather than toilet paper?
Yeah.
I, I,
I saw a meme today, and it was a still picture from the movie Outbreak, and Dustin Hoffman and his cronies are wandering along in their yellow spacesuit type things, and one is saying, "Would you look at all the bodies here?" And the other one replies, "Yeah, but have you seen how clean their asses are?" I mean, I just don't get it. I wonder if it's a psychological comfort thing. Well, at least I won't run out of toilet paper.
I honestly think that in human psychology thing, a meme, like the same reason people were fucking eating Tide Pods and shit. Right? There's no logical, rational reason why, but the rest of the internet's doing it, so let's do it. And this is an even less harmful. Like, this is what anyone can do and have a laugh at.
Yeah.
And there's obviously going to be dumb people out there as well thinking, oh my God, if everyone's buying toilet paper, then we must need to buy toilet paper.
Yeah, I mean,
My friend thinks
don't
it's a
get it.
conspiracy to get rid of all the non-perishable goods.
The other thing that they seem to be selling out of is bottled water. To be honest, I feel safer with tap water at the moment. Anyway.
Yeah, right. But also, why? Why does the flu have anything to do with toilet paper or bath water,
It's not
or tap water?
it's not a flu. Be careful of that. It's not a flu. It's worse than a flu. Just that's something that everyone needs to bear in mind. The flu mortality rate is about 0.1%. The mortality rate of this is hovering at 3 at the moment. So that makes it 30 times more fatal and also more infectious. So this is why it needs to be taken dead seriously. But yeah, I'm just... My husband went out to buy soup, and I asked him to get tomato soup and lentil soup, right? So we got a 4-pack of tomato soup and 2 tins of lentil soup. And he actually had trouble at the checkout because they were limiting everybody to 5 tins of soup. But because the tomato soup came in a 4-pack, he was only then allowed 1 other tin. They let him through with 6 tins of soup. But the big supermarkets in the UK, like Asda and Tesco, their shelves are wiped clean. I decided to say to hubby, this stuff you couldn't get, go to the local tiny mini market and I bet you'll get it there. And sure enough, and it's because I'm sort of rural, so our little local what passes for a supermarket doesn't get descended on by hordes of people.
Yeah, that's like I've spoken to a few people today, and all of them have told me to just go to your local shops. You'll probably have more luck there.
Yeah, because the
I'm
people
in
who
London as well, so
yeah. The people who
I think
panic buying are going to the big supermarkets to buy huge amounts of stuff. They're not going to the corner shop. So, and also, I mean, there are all sorts of wee mini markets around. There's lots of those small news agents that carry groceries as well, and they're fine. It's just the big Asda's and Tesco's and Morrison's that are just seeing their shelves wiped by people panic buying, which I just don't get. Having said that, we've got quite a stock of Lurol because We stocked up at the end of last year for Brexit. But we did that over a period of a couple of months.
So what do you think about its overall impact on the economy? I know England's feeling it already.
It can't be helped. There is no way to avoid it. If people have to stay at home, then people aren't going to, and they're not going to be, I mean, they're all worried about, if I'm not going to work, am I going to be paid? I mean, in the UK, we're sort of lucky in that if somebody gets sick, if the employer doesn't do sick pay, there is statutory sick pay. So that at least people shouldn't be left absolutely destitute, but they're still worrying about money, so they're not going to be spending it on things other than essentials. So the economy is going to take a big hit. And if you're telling people to stay at home, non-essential work shouldn't even be going to work, then there are going to be factories and places like that shutting down because the workers can't go. Again, slows the economy. You can't avoid that. If it's a toss-up between, say, 3% of your population dying or your economy taking a hit, which one do you take? That's the big question that governments have to balance, and some balance it better than others.
How do you think it's done to this, and how do you think they should do it in the future?
Well, number one, like China needs a rap of the knuckles for not being quite as open as they could have been. But having said that, they didn't keep it an absolute secret as long as is being suggested. They published the sequence, I think, on the 11th of January. And they had told the WHO, the World Health Organization, that they had this outbreak of an unidentified virus at the time. China was in the unenviable position of being the first hit and having no idea what they'd been hit with. They discovered what was causing it. So the rest of the world got a heads up. We didn't know the incubation period, so it was hard to know how fast it was spreading. They didn't think it was spreading fast because people weren't coming down with it, or so they thought. They didn't factor in this up to 2-week incubation period. So when they thought, oh, well, there's no human-to-human spread, there was. Those people just hadn't got sick yet. So they jumped to a conclusion that, with hindsight, was wrong. So in the future, you get an outbreak like this beginning, I think you need to put in a pandemic response team to the location where it's starting. That's if you've got a pandemic response team. That is if your president hasn't disbanded it because, well, I'm saving money because there isn't currently a pandemic. You need feet on the ground. You need people to go in there and help the local area to deal with it. Because the local area is overwhelmed with just dealing with the patients rather than the logistics of it all. You don't want the doctors and nurses wasting their time running about trying to do contact tracing or trying to source personal protective equipment. You need somebody else doing that. And because of the long incubation period, every step that has been taken by just about every country has come too late. When the numbers are saying we need to do this now, you actually hit that number 2 weeks before. And that's the problem. Because you can always look back, but you can't look forwards when you're looking at these numbers.
So, how you said earlier that you think it normally takes a year to go through human trials and everything, but do you think it can be done quicker because of the nature of this?
I don't know. I would like to think that they may attempt to speed it up. But then you've got to factor in something that seems completely unrelated but isn't: anti-vaxxers. You see, we've already had a problem with anti-vaxxers, and now we're desperate for this vaccine. If it's introduced too fast, and if there is a problem with it, then that buggers the globe for all the other vaccines as well. Even although these are extenuating circumstances where we may have to go with a less tested vaccine, the long-term effects could be awful if there's a problem with it. And I mean the long-term effects on other vaccine programs. That needs to be borne in mind. So they're going to have to be really cautious. And one of the questions that's exercising my brain is this: see all these anti-vaxxers that wouldn't get their children vaccinated against measles and whooping cough and polio and diphtheria and tetanus. If a vaccine is developed for this, will those parents now say, could I have the vaccine, please? Or will they deny it to themselves the way they deny their children?
I think the whole anti-vaxxers situation hopefully isn't strong enough to have some true impact on this situation. I just wanted to let you know and everyone else know that I've changed the stream layout for another hour, and I've opened it up to anyone else that wants to come in and talk to Fiona about anything. So we'll just chill out and talk for a bit more. But if you want to come in, click on the Discord link and come in and talk and ask some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to stay sort of away from the politics of this, because, well, just because people need information pertinent to them, regardless of what politicians are doing. They need information about keeping themselves and their own families safe. And that information should be coming from a year ago. That information should be coming from governments. And the governments should be making it easy for you to follow those instructions, as some of them aren't doing that. They're not making it easy for people to stay at home. Waitresses who aren't even on a wage, and they make their living from just tips. As soon as their restaurant shuts down, they have nothing, and they've got no safety net in certain places in the world. That makes it difficult for them to say, I'll stay at home, because if the restaurant shuts down, they'll just go, I have to go and look for a job somewhere else. They've got a rent payment to make or a utility bill. One thing I would say is, see all these places, restaurants that also do takeouts. If you've got a local one, encourage them by still getting takeouts from them. The grab and go.
Isn't that sketchy?
No, I don't think it is. As long as you remember that when you get home meal, right, you unpack most of it, and then you go and wash your hands before you dish up your food, and you should be fine. 2 weeks ago, I sent my husband out for pizzas, and he came home with them, and he opened the pizza boxes, and then all the hands were all washed, and then the pizzas were lifted out the boxes, just in case. Because the pizza was roasting hot, the virus wouldn't survive on it. But the cardboard, don't know, not taking the chance. So yeah, you can still get your takeouts. The only reason I'm not getting them is because I don't want to be going outside and meeting up with other people in any way, shape or form. And I'm not that keen on my husband doing that either. So takeouts at the moment we are not doing. But as I say, that's only because both me and my husband are in a high risk group. And in fact, I should maybe mention high risk groups. You've got people with asthma, and that includes allergy induced asthma, anything that stops you being able to breathe properly. Okay. On immunosuppressants, if you're on them for any reason. Okay. If you've got a heart condition or diabetes or kidney problem, if there's any other underlying condition, then you are at more risk of getting the complications from this. And there are people out there that have underlying conditions. My husband, he didn't know that he was diabetic until he had a small stroke. And that's when he found out. He had no idea. So don't think, oh well, I'm 45 and I'm nice and healthy, therefore I don't need to worry about catching this. You don't know. You need to treat it seriously, just in case, because it's going to be a bit of a bummer as they're shoving the tube down your throat to ventilate you, and you think, damn it, I was wrong. It's just err on the side of caution. If you're overcautious, you just look like a bit of a numpty. But if you're undercautious, you might end up being seriously ill yourself or killing your granny. I'd rather just look like a bit of a numpty for having been overcautious. I don't want to be the one who gets this and gives it to other people. Does that make sense?
I think that's what the most people are not getting, though. They are more concerned about getting it themselves rather than actually being the one who's spreading it to others.
That's true. They're not thinking about this chain of infection because it all ends at them. We all tend to think that way. We are the final step in that chain. We think, and then we don't think any further down the line. But if you get this and you incubate for 14 days and you're infectious from day 5 and you don't know it, and you're wandering around everywhere from day 5 to day 14.
I don't know if you mentioned that earlier, but like, would that mean even if I could be infected, but I don't show symptoms, but I could be still infectious?
Yes, that's the problem. Because of this lag between becoming infected and becoming symptomatic. Currently, the longest time period between becoming infected and becoming symptomatic was 27 days. Now, that's an outlier. That's an unusual one. The average is 10 to 14 days.
That seems to be a very long time. Now, I'm not too sure if that would actually be an impact, because you see it in countries like Australia. But how would, let's say in Europe, the weather gets better now in the summer? Would that have any impact on the whole situation?
They don't know. They have no idea. Again, it's a new virus. Some viruses have shown a seasonal pattern, but we only know about seasonal patterns when we look back on the numbers. We've got no numbers to look back on here, so we don't know. But suffice to say that places like South Korea, they're pretty hot places, and it still was spreading around there.
South Korea seems to have it in check, though, right? I mean, their numbers seem to be going down now.
But they did mass testing, and they isolated everybody that came up positive, and then they did contact tracing. And it's that testing and then contact tracing. So you remember what I said about running behind the virus? If you only test those people with symptoms, You miss all the people that person has infected, right?
Yeah,
If you contact trace, you will start to pick up all those people before they get to the stage of shedding the virus as well. And that's what South Korea did.
there seems to be in a lot of European countries, that seems to be a lack in testing there. I think specifically in the UK, it seems that they're actually only testing those that have like more or less severe symptoms.
Yeah. And that's
So
the problem.
Now their death toll seems statistically way higher than some other countries. So obviously that messes up the statistics too, because there could be a lot of people that are infected that actually don't even show up in that statistic.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems that we've had. At one point, because of the really bad testing that was happening in the US, if you looked at the number of confirmed cases and the number of deaths, they were running at something like a 48% mortality rate. That wasn't because it was more lethal in the States. It was because the number of confirmed cases was artificially low. So it was skewing the statistic to making it more lethal. But it
I was
wasn't
thinking in countries like the US, because you don't have that healthcare system, it may didn't encourage too many people to necessarily go to a doctor if they have just like mild symptoms.
Well, I think that's part of it, because of co-pays and all the rest of it. I mean, I know people think that socialised healthcare is a terrible thing. Oh, you'll have death panels, and look what's happened in Italy and all the rest of it. That's not because it's socialised healthcare, and it's not death panels. It's called triage. When the health service gets overwhelmed, they have no option but to triage. Okay. But when people have got this barrier between getting the medical advice or treatment because they can't afford that initial consult, then you got a problem. Then people aren't going to go to the doctor with these symptoms. And now healthy people with no symptoms are screaming to be tested. Why? It's too late now. It's too late for the surveillance. That surveillance was crucial at the very start of it. That's how you nip it in the bud. It didn't happen.
No, because people are doing a lot, or like a lot of countries are starting to do a lot more of that testing. Do you think that why as well the statistics are spiking a lot more?
Yes, but as I said earlier, those that get confirmed today were infected 10 to 14 days ago. So the number that you're seeing for today is the number that were infected 10 to 14 days ago. You're still running way behind. Because in a lot of these countries, even although there's a lot more testing, they're still saving them for the symptomatic.
So today
I just want to say one thing about restaurants. I don't know what they do in other countries, but most people in the food industry have to have a food handler's license. You have to take classes. And most restaurants want you to follow the guidelines for proper food handling. So if you touch your face, you're supposed to wash your hands.
Yeah.
And besides that, they usually wear gloves anyway. So getting takeout, getting DoorDash or Uber Eats. I mean, if you do that, you're putting trust into the driver. But if you go and pick up your food, I think you're fine.
Yeah, I think it's the reason they've been stopping the restaurants and eating in is because they don't want a crowd of people in one place all eating. That's what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
they close
about
down
all the
in-house
diners
eating.
together.
Yeah.
So they don't want people to congregate in these spaces. And that makes sense. But as you said, food handlers, they have rules. They're used to following these rules. they're better at it than everybody else. So takeout isn't that much of a concern.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, definitely support your local food places, whether it's fast food or like a mom and pop restaurant. It's definitely support them if you can still.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. And it's also a lot of restaurants that just changed the whole business concept and are just, focus on doing that just so to keep them going.
Uh-huh. But the big message is, if you've been told to stay at home, do it. They've told you that for a reason. Looking at the numbers, they should have done this a while ago. It's Illinois, New York, and California at the moment in the States. And in the UK, they're now trying to encourage people to stay at home as well. It's not an order. They're not going to be arresting you. They're asking you nicely. I just noticed somebody has asked why Italy has been hit more than other places. They didn't flatten the curve. So they got a lot of cases in one short time period, and it overwhelmed the hospitals. The hospitals ran out of ventilators for people. The healthcare workers started to get sick. And that's why Italy has ended up with this big problem. I mean, at the time it took hold in Italy, the only other place other than China that it seemed to be really getting a foothold was in Iran. Iran's numbers at the moment just don't look right at all. They really don't look right. Something's wrong there. It seems to be that you can only get admitted to hospital in Iran if you're critically ill, and they only count you as a case if you're admitted to hospital. So all the others have been missed.
So you think there's a way bigger issue because the numbers already look pretty high?
Uh-huh. Iran was much higher than Italy. And now Iran's numbers are... I'll start at the top of the table for numbers and down. China, then Italy, then Spain, then the US, then Germany, then Iran, then France, then South Korea, then Switzerland, and then the United Kingdom. And United Kingdom is currently at, 5,067 cases with 234 deaths in the UK.
Yeah, they're really spiking now. They had like a huge spike today, and also a high death toll. So it's definitely going up. But if I may ask, what
is at 24,000
Yeah,
cases.
US had the biggest spike today. Yeah,
and 285 deaths.
I think USA is on the path to overtake most of them.
Yeah, there are only 3 countries above the US now: China, Italy, and Spain.
Now, China numbers seem to be flattening a lot. But what's your take on their numbers in general?
I don't like the look of them. I'm going to put a link into the live chat, right? And I'm going to ask people to go and click on this link, okay? Right. Click on that link, and you will get up. It's numbers provided by Johns Hopkins, okay? And down in the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a very small graph. And it's got 3 lines on it. Now, the wee box that the graph is living in, you'll see top right-hand corner, there are little arrows to click to enlarge the graph to full page or full screen, right? And if you click that, you actually get to see the graph. The orange line is China. The green line is worldwide numbers recovered, including China. But the yellow line is other locations.
Infected other locations?
Sorry?
Is that other locations infected?
Yes. That's the numbers worldwide minus China.
So either
Okay.
they did it in absolute perfect time because they didn't have any huge spike compared to their number of people they have, or they're like just faking it totally.
No, you see, this is the thing. This graph last week, that looked so much worse for China. China looks so flat now because they've had to extend the y-axis.
That's true, yes, because now there is a lot more locations that you have to add.
Yeah, because it was only on the 15th of March that the number of cases in other locations finally went higher than the number in China. It crossed over.
Other locations worldwide is definitely exponentially growing
It is
here.
still exponentially growing. Yeah, I've been using this little graph. I had estimated that the numbers by end of play today or first thing tomorrow morning would be 222,000. And they're currently at 221.9 thousand. So I'm not far out because the updated numbers have gone in. And I'm doing that just by using a cigarette packet against the line. So it's still exponential.
Yeah, it seems predictable at the moment, yeah.
If you click, see underneath the graph, you've got the wee bit telling you what the colours are. If you click on the circle for mainland China, that'll take the Chinese data off. And if you click on total recovered and take that off as well, right? And then just look at the other locations. And that is the most stunning exponential increase. You can also, down the bottom left, click on logarithmic to turn the y-axis.
Yeah.
And that should give you a straight line. And there it is. That is a stunningly straight line.
Yeah, pretty much. It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad look. That's a really bad look. So nothing is at the moment happening to slow down the spread.
If that continues, you would be talking about 240 and then maybe going up to 280. So maybe within a week you have at least like another 200,000.
Yeah.
Or even more.
And that's the problem with this. It's such a that graph there is a teaching graph. If you were teaching epidemiology, that's the sort of graph you would use to demonstrate just what something as contagious as this and how it can get out of hand. And for anybody that's still struggling with this, the idea of logarithmic increase, we'd be talking about numbers going like this. You double every time, right? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So each step is a much bigger increase than the step before because you're doubling it each time.
The death toll is following the same curve.
Yeah. When you look at the numbers for deaths, I've been working them out based on total confirmed in a country with total number of deaths. At the end of an outbreak, you're able to take your total number of deaths and you divide it by total deaths plus total recovered. But currently we can't do that because so many are not recovered. So many they're not a death and they're not a recovered, so they wouldn't be counted in. If you do that with the numbers out of America, I think it was 4 days ago, if you did that calculation with the US number, the death rate was coming out to 85%. Now, it isn't 85%, but that's because they had so few recovered. And they had so few that were like confirmed to be infected. But they had this total number of deaths. So it again, it skews the statistic. So the easiest approximation at the moment is to take total confirmed, and that's what you use to divide the total deaths by, and then multiply by 100, and that'll give you your mortality rate.
Is there also a way to calculate how many would still have it and haven't been tested?
No, there isn't. That's difficult because the only way you could do that to do a big surveillance testing of a sample and then extrapolate out to population from there. And they're just not doing that. I mean, and it would have to be a random sample. And then you could say, oh, we've discovered that, say, 1% of the population is infected. But nobody's got those numbers because currently they're only testing those that have symptoms. So you've got no way of knowing who has it but doesn't have symptoms.
Now, that might be a weird question. You might not have an answer to this, but another number that seems to be not correct is the number from Russia, 306 in total.
I don't believe that number for a minute. I really don't.
It seems impossible somehow.
There are certain numbers when you look on, you think, no chance. It doesn't look right.
The same with
doesn't.
India.
Now, India is an interesting one because it didn't turn up there for quite some time. Was that lack of testing? Or was it that it just hadn't got into India yet? Really don't know. A lot of people were running with conspiracy theories because, there's no cases in Africa. Well, that's because I hadn't got to Africa. It's now there.
Yeah, what do you think will be the impact there? Because the numbers seem very small at the moment, but I see even in all the small countries, when you look at the new cases that come in, they may have had like only a few numbers, but the new cases are actually getting really high now as well.
Yeah, there's going to be a problem in Africa with testing.
Yeah.
Also
with the healthcare in general, I suppose.
Yeah, but the WHO provide their test kits free to impoverished countries. I mean, they ask first world countries to pay for the kits because obviously the WHO's they've got to cover their own costs if they want to keep producing kits, if they want to keep working and doing the job that they do. But they will give the kits out for free because they've got a vested interest in knowing what diseases are and in trying to control them.
So,
I mean, the World Health Organization. So they're trying to stop this sort of thing.
It looks like, when I look at the number, on March 17, it was worldwide 198, so nearly 200,000. And today is the 21st. And we are up to 304,000. So that's like within 3 days, it's a bit more than 100,000 cases. And if it grows like that, we will, in the next 3 days, we should have another 200,000 cases, depending on how they test.
Yeah, I think it's doubling every 3 days.
Yeah.
Which is frightening.
So you're working from home now?
Well, I'm retired,
Oh, well, okay.
and I'm in a reasonable place, so all I have to do is deal with horses and cats and the occasional baby rabbit. So I'm okay at the moment, but my husband's still having to go into work. He worked from home on Friday. Actually, I need to ask him this. Darling, are you working from home on Monday?
Sorry?
Are you working from home on Monday, darling? No, he's going to work on Monday.
Yeah. I'm actually only working from home now. They pretty much shut down the office.
Yeah.
They tried another scheme like in another office where they say like half of the people in the office work from home and then they swap another half so that at least not
Yeah.
everybody gets infected or something.
Yeah,
So-
I think some of the workplaces, what they've done is they've said that those employees that are high risk, so they've got an underlying health condition, they're the first ones to be able to work from home. And I mean, that is a good idea.
I have asthma myself, and the other day I wanted to get I have a medicine that I use. It's called Symbicort. Probably heard of that. It's actually
Is that the preventive inhaler?
yes.
That's supposed to actually help a bit. It's anecdotal though.
Is it? Yeah. You mean like because the other day I wanted to get a prescription just and normally I have a certain strength I get and everything, but they didn't have it in stock because it's in high demand apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get half the strength, use double the amount and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's actually something that is somebody had asked about actually in the live chat and I'd forgotten. And it was asking about these drugs that Trump has been saying he thinks are going to be miracle drugs. The problem is that this anti-malarial that he's pushing
Yeah.
has got some really nasty side effects at the best of times.
Well, he said it's the best stuff ever.
Yeah, but it does have these really nasty side effects, and that can include heart arrhythmias. So we're talking serious. If you've got to be so careful with the dose, but it also can interact with other medicines that you're already taking, and either stop them working, or potentiate them, or the other medicine potentiates it. And it seems that I think it was in Nigeria, they are now getting cases of toxicity.
But they use it as a malaria
Oh.
treatment, right?
They do, but that's under medical supervision. And people are now going to pharmacies and just buying it and taking it.
Can you just buy that? I mean, has this been tested? Does this actually work on the coronavirus?
Anecdotal evidence yet again. That's the problem. Because at press conferences, a certain mango whistle been pushing this as some sort of miracle drug, and Fauci has been trying to urge caution because it can be not a dangerous drug. Because of the side effects and because it is easy to take too much of it, then it can end up posing a greater risk than the virus itself. And as I say, in Nigeria, it seems that they're now getting some cases of toxicity. That's the hydrochloroquine.
Is it because it's a bad batch, or how does it get toxic?
It's because people are just buying it over the counter and self-administering.
Oh, okay. Overdose and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. There was anecdotal evidence. Not only did it shorten the illness, but it may have some form of preventative effect. As I say, that's anecdotal. There have been no trials.
Does it mean technically it should work, or?
No, anecdotal means I heard it from somebody who said it. Type
Okay.
thing.
And we don't
I
know who
mean-
said it?
Here's the thing, right? You get a bunch of doctors in the hospital, okay, they've got very, very sick patients, and they notice that somebody who's also on an anti-malarial does quite well. And they think, ooh, I wonder. And they have some very, very
Okay.
sick patients that are going to die. And as a last resort, they think, ooh, I wonder if should I try this? And the patient turns a corner and they get better. But were they going to turn? Were they going to turn the corner anyway, or
Yes.
was it the drug? And this is the problem, because it's not a controlled trial. You can't answer that question. It's like those people who say, do you know, inhaling beetroot juice through a straw is a brilliant way to cure a cold, because I'd had a cold for 5 days and I snorted beetroot juice, and 5 days later I was fine. Well, you were going to be fine anyway before you snorted the beetroot juice.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like I lost my keys. I had a prayer and I found my keys.
Yeah, and it's always, have you noticed that everybody who loses their keys always finds them in the last place they looked? And the reason for that is because once they've found them, they stop fucking.
I've seen that apparently the coronavirus itself seems to be so bad that you get a really severe case of pneumonia, and like you can scar your tissue in the lung. So if somebody has asthma already, how would that affect him? Oh, I got kicked out. Did we lose Fiona?
I think we lost Fiona. Oh,
Yep.
yep, she got kicked out too. Darn server. Internet. Darn
Can you-
technology.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right. If your lung function is already compromised in any way, you don't need it being compromised even further.
So basically, you're saying smoking doesn't help.
Yeah, she said as she picked up her cigarette from the ashtray. Yeah. So
Yeah, I
Is-
smoke too.
yeah, think about it this way. If you get an infection in your gut that stops your gut doing what it normally does, which is absorb nutrients, okay? And you get your immune response in your gut, what happens? You get the runs, you get diarrhea, okay? A week of diarrhea, okay? You can cope with that. But imagine it's a virus that stops your lungs getting oxygen into your body. You ain't going to last a week.
Yeah, I get you.
It's because of where it's infecting, because of what it's affecting, that makes it so severe. You can't go without your lungs functioning for a week.
Yeah, it's funny. I had in my head, because I have asthma basically my whole life, so or 30 plus years,
Mhm.
and I had like in my mind, well, that hasn't killed me, so I've been hardened. But this is probably not how it works.
Yeah, it's because this will be on top of any effects of asthma, or on top of any effects of COPD. They all add up, and that's the problem. Those that have got
Fiona-
respiratory problems already are in trouble. Yes.
I missed the beginning of your interview, but did you talk about like actual cases, like what they're seeing happens to people like in the hospital and stuff?
Yeah. One of the things I read today was from a doctor who was astounded at just how quickly a patient could go off. As in, they seem to be doing fine and then suddenly they just crash. And that was a real shock to them. And when you have as many patients as that, it's going to be difficult to notice when one suddenly goes off. This is what Italy's dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, from what I heard, like it seems that you get better at first, and then you kind of relapse with another symptom.
That has happened to a lot of the patients, and this is what happened with SARS in 2004. That was a coronavirus as well. Oh yeah, can I also please bring this up? There have been a lot of conspiracy theories doing the rounds on Facebook, and people are showing the very small print from the Lysol wipe container, and it says that it's effective against coronavirus. And they're saying, I bought this in 2018. How did they know coronavirus would happen in 2019? Well, that's because there's loads of different coronavirus. SARS, the first time round, was a coronavirus. We've known about coronaviruses for a long, long time, but this is a new variant.
But it seems though that this variant is way easier spreadable than the SARS was, because SARS was you were able to contain that.
Well, you see, I don't know. I need to look into that more. But I do know that the containment measures were put into effect fast with SARS. Really fast. A lot faster than this time round. I mean, I've actually been mainly following what's going on in the US because it's given me a chance to watch these numbers from the very beginning in the US. Going from 0 cases, I've been able to watch it all the way through. It's a bit like, Nate Brodie was saying that the legal case he's been following, it's unusual to be able to watch a case right from from even before it became a legal case and to watch all the steps. And he finds that fascinating. And I've watched the US for the same reason, to see it actually begin and then what happens and what happens in response to the various steps that are taken to control it. But so far, there haven't been any decent steps taken to control it in the US. So we're seeing the numbers just skyrocket.
I mean, they have like a few things implemented by states, right, or even some cities, but they don't have like a whole coverage for the US where they say like everybody's on lockdown or whatever.
Yeah,
because the numbers seem to be going crazier at this point.
Yeah, but the effects of the steps that they've just taken, you'll see in about 10 days to a fortnight because of the incubation period. It's like I'm expecting a big spike in cases in the US between this weekend and next weekend. And that's because last weekend was the debacle at the airports, where hundreds and hundreds of people flying in from high-risk countries were all crammed together for 8 hours trying to get through baggage collection and immigration and health testing. Some of them were there for 8 hours.
Nobody got tested, right?
I think they started off with great intentions of testing people's temperatures, and the whole thing, because they didn't have more staff in to do all this, the queues just built up, and eventually they couldn't do it anymore. But those people were all packed together shoulder to shoulder for about 8 hours in places. So I'm expecting a big spike in the US cases between this weekend and next weekend, and it'll be coming from what happened last weekend in the airports. And then there'll be another big spike in about maybe 10 days to a fortnight's time, courtesy of spring break after the scenes on the Florida beaches. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
I've been watching it in Ireland, how the numbers are, and the numbers are rising now a lot. I mean, the numbers are very low in comparison, but we're a very small island as well. So that why I keep an eye on the worldometer, and what's very interesting is when you actually look into the total cases by 1 million population, and San Marino's on top with 160 cases only, but like that doesn't count. But you see now in a rise, like in countries like Norway and Austria, it's getting really bad, and Germany.
Switzerland.
So, yeah, Switzerland as well. Switzerland is like very high. They have like 793 by 1 million. That's a very high number.
It's very, very strange. They obviously had, I suppose, what we could call a super spreader, but I don't think it is. I think it's a case of it's getting under the radar. I mean, if your first case that comes in is already feeling ill, okay, they infected everybody on the plane and anybody coughed on at the airport, but then they go home and they stay in their bed because they're feeling ill. They don't pass it to anybody else. But what if they're incubating, they don't have symptoms yet, and so they're out and about, and they're spreading it even more? I think it all depends on the circumstances of those initial cases, whether it takes off. Because again, there's that 2-week lag. You don't know you've had somebody come in and spreading it around until 2 weeks later.
Do you know the way a lot of the countries are now trying to stock up on ventilators and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, when the symptoms get that bad that you have to be on a ventilator, like what are your survival chances at this point?
I honestly couldn't tell you offhand. That's not a number I've really cared to look into. You're not guaranteed to die, let's put it that way. But you're in a bad place.
Yeah.
I mean, if needing a ventilator meant that you couldn't be saved, then there would be no point in ventilating anybody. But no, they have kept people alive and they have recovered. It's just that, you know, they are really severe, and it's not a number I really want to know, because I don't think I'd like it.
Yeah, I know. I totally get you. I think it would be for me. It would be interesting just to see, like, if you get to that stage, is there's like still like a way out, is a way back to get better, because your lungs have to be damaged pretty bad at that point.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even be conscious, I'd say, at this point either.
But then again, you'd also a lot of the problem with your gas exchange is because of the fluids in your lungs. The fluid is stopping that. And if they can keep you going long enough for you to start clearing that fluid yourself, then as the fluid clears and you're getting better, your oxygen exchange gets better.
So you're drowning in your own lung, basically, right?
Yeah.
And is there not a way to like drain it?
No.
So you just have to do it yourself, basically.
They suction. I mean, they will suction the patients, but they can't get right down into the little air sacs at the bottom.
Yeah, it's very fine, I suppose.
Yeah. So, and they can't go and hoover out every single little air sac. Yeah, there's only so much that they can do.
So at this point, it's like a bacterial infection, right? Where you have pneumonia and you're on, because the real damage is the aftermath from the virus, I suppose.
It seems to be that there is a lot of damage done by the virus itself, but in these severe cases, the real serious sequelae are coming from your immune system trying to fight it, and it just goes into overdrive. I think it's probably something to do with viral load.
So from that virus itself, from what I understand, it actually turns your immune system against you, where they actually basically start like going crazy and damage the infected cells plus the healthy cells.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I mean, that happens with any viral illness. If your immune system is able to recognize those cells that are already infected and do something about them, then it will happen. So as I say, that'll happen in a number of viral diseases. But for some reason, with coronaviruses, a cytokine storm seems to be more common than with other viruses.
And from what I understand, even some people who had the virus and recovered got it again, which is quite interesting.
There's been I know of one report, but again, you always find outliers. There was a chap I worked with when I worked in hospitals, and we did tuberculosis testing. So we all had to have an annual chest x-ray, and our BCG vaccination had to be up to date. And every year we had to have a skin test to make sure our immunity was still there. And it didn't matter how many times they vaccinated this guy, he never, ever got a positive skin test. Never. Because for some reason, he just could not mount immunity to tuberculosis. It was an oddity. So he was not allowed to work in the TB lab because we knew he had no immunity to it whatsoever. He wasn't immunocompromised. He could fight off any other infections, but for some reason,
weird.
Yeah, it was a real strange one. So if it was somebody like that, then yes, they could get it again. But are they unusual, or is this a common thing? We don't know yet. New disease, we don't know enough about it.
But
there's so many unknowns.
It seems to be something new that's here to stay in one way or another.
Yeah, until I think we find a vaccine for it. And you then, once the memory of, if we got a vaccine, once the memory of this is gone, then you'll have the anti-vaxxers again.
I mean, you already have a lot of conspiracy theories about it, right? How it's been introduced at the right times to have a reason to crash the stock market and who knows what. Like, I mean, have a hard reset to,
Yeah, there's somebody came up with they manufactured and released this virus just to bring Trump down, and you think, so they killed all those Italians to bring Trump down? No. Or the whole thing is a hoax to bring Trump down. So Italy and Iran and South Korea and Germany and France and Spain, we're all just kidding. No. Some of the conspiracy theories are nothing more than batshit.
Oh yeah, I mean, some go into quite some detail to make it sound very convincing, but it obviously, if you really think about it, it doesn't really make much sense.
No, it doesn't. But my sort of, if anybody's got anything from this that I've done tonight, I would hope it's stay home if you're told to stay home. Stay home if you can. If you haven't been told to stay home, keep at least 6 feet between you and anybody else when you're out. Don't shake hands. Don't hug. Don't kiss. And keep yourself and keep you and yours safe. But anyway, I'm going to go, guys, because I'm a tired little bunny.
Thank you very much for your time.
I want to thank AO for setting this up tonight, because I only contacted her this afternoon about this. And she did a stellar job. And I also want to thank somebody. I want to thank Renee, who I spoke to earlier on today, and who convinced me that I should do this. Just to answer questions that people have. Because I know people have got a lot of questions and they're scared to ask them because they think, well, this might be a stupid question. I don't want to look daft. And I'm hoping that, I mean, no question in this is daft. You know, if there's something that you want to know and you don't have that answer, then your question isn't daft.
Well, I always think a stupid question stays a stupid question unless you ask it.
Yeah. And because there is so little information, I mean, especially, right here, I'm going to get political now, especially for Americans. They're not getting the information from their government. They're getting lies, they're getting deflection, they're getting misinformation. And they really are left thinking, who am I supposed to believe here? How is this real? There are people who still think the virus doesn't exist. Well, it does. It's real. It's here. People have got it. People are sick and people are dying. Ask Italy. Italy was so unlucky. So unlucky. But they didn't know what they were dealing with at the time. They had no idea. Was. Now you've got all that information. You know how contagious it is. You know how long the incubation period is. America's got no excuse. Except the orange excuse. And I'm sorry to have gone sort of a bit political on this. But unless it starts to be taken seriously, and unless they stop saying it's a hoax, or they stop saying it'll go away. I mean, they seem to think it'll go away if we ignore it. Well, it isn't going away. So Americans, please stay home, stay safe. And anyway,
on that note, I just want to say thank you, Fiona. It's been really good listening to you, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us all.
Listen, if anybody's got questions for me, DM me. And I'll do my best to answer them. There are going to be a lot of questions that I answer with, I don't know. And that's either due to just me being ignorant about it, or because with it being new, nobody knows. But at least I don't know is better than not getting any answer at all. So anybody, please feel free to DM me. Or pop it into the GDC Discord and tag me, and I'll do my best.
And there's always a comment section under this live stream when it's finished uploading. So yes, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Fiona, for your time, and thank you, Parson, and everyone else that took part in the second half. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you in the next one. I will go live again in a second with the usual 24-hour live stream if you all want to talk amongst yourself.